I'll be talking about fever in ICU, the non-infectious causes, which is extremely important in ICU, as we deal with a fair number of non-infectious causes of fever. So the topics that I would be covering is definition, pathogenesis, and the temperature, bit about temperature recording, and the list of non-infectious causes. There are about 17 causes, and drug fever, adrenal insufficiency, thyroid storm, diagnostic approach to the non-infectious causes of fever, management and role of antipyretics, and take-home message. So, what's the definition of fever, which is defined in this particular journal? So, it is a complex physiological response to the disease, which leads to cytokine production, and that leads to fever and production of acute phase reactants. Along with it, there is activation of endocrine and immunological processes in the body, and together this would define as fever. So it is a complex physiological response to the disease manifested by extensive cytokine production leading to rise in temperature, acute phase reactant production, along with activation of endocrine and immunological processes. So, what is the pathogenesis of fever? So, when there is exposure to endotoxin, viruses, or staph aureus, so the lymphocytes get activated and they produce interleukin 1, interleukin 6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. And what this leads to is signal transduction by the vascular endothelium, and that leads to increased production of COX2 and prostaglandin E2, and this leads to reduced firing of heat sensitive neurons, and this leads to either decreased heat loss or increased heat production, and together this causes fever. So that's in essence the pathogenesis of fever. So the normal temperature that is recorded is 37 degree or 98.6 degree Fahrenheit. So the American Association of Critical Care Medicine, or IDSA, defines fever as temperature more than or equal to 38.3 degrees centigrade or 101 degree Fahrenheit. And the temperature measurement, I think what we need to understand is either we could do peripheral recording of the temperature or core temperature that would be recorded. So the core temperature is recorded with the help of PA catheter, or you could simply measure the vesicle temperature or the rectal temperature. I think these three constitute the core temperature measurement. The peripheral temperature, you could measure it by oral temperature or axillary or by the tympanic recording of the temperature. So the next question is, how common is fever in ICU? So in a study by Lopland et al., where he looked at 24,000 ICU admission, around 44% of the patients had at least one episode of temperature during their stay in ICU, and around 8% of the patients had temperature more than 39.5 degrees centigrade. And it was found that patients who had temperature more than 39.5 degree had increased mortality. So the mortality was up to 20% as compared to 12% in patients who had temperature less than 39.5 degree. So how do we evaluate fever in intensive care? So the fever can be broadly divided into infectious causes and non-infectious causes. So generally the infectious causes of fever are treatable. So what we need to understand is when there is a delayed diagnosis or treatment. So if there is a delay in establishing diagnosis of what the infection is, and when there is a delay in appropriate treatment, it is found to cause worse outcomes. So the non-infectious causes of fever are generally non-modifiable, and it may lead to worse outcome or it may not have any bearing on the clinical outcome. So I've just put in a pictorial representation of all the non-infectious causes of fever so that it would make it easy for you to recall. So any hematoma in the brain, so subdural hemorrhage or intracranial hemorrhage or subarachnoid hemorrhage. So any hemorrhage in the brain can lead to fever. So when you come down to the endocrine causes, any thyroid storm or hyperthyroidism or thyrotoxicosis can lead to fever, or simple or any major surgery can itself lead to fever, and there are many drugs that are listed which can cause fever in ICU, non-infectious causes. and gout is one of the cause for non-infectious causes of fever. Alcohol withdrawal is one of the causes for non-infectious causes of fever, and non-infectious conditions like myocardial infarction and ARDS can also lead to febrile response, and any sepsis due to non-infectious causes or any vasculitis can lead to febrile response or any viral sepsis. So so I think any vasculitis which may be non-infectious also can lead to fever, and transfusion reaction is one of the causes for non-infectious cause of fever, or any tumors like liver tumors or any neoplastic conditions can lead to non-infectious causes of fever, and colitis, so acalculous cholecystitis or pancreatitis can lead to non-infectious causes of fever. Adrenal insufficiency can lead to non-infectious causes of fever, or hematoma anywhere in the body, or venous thromboembolism. So all these can lead to non-infectious causes of fever, and including burns as well can cause non-infectious causes of fever. So, so is there any relevance about the magnitude of the fever in determining whether it's infectious or non-infectious? So, if the temperature is around 38.3 degree to 38.8 or 101 to 101.8, so you would stratify it as another group where temperature is 102 to 105.8, and a group where temperature is more than 106 degree Fahrenheit. So if the temperature is in this range 101 to 101.8, again it can be divided into possibly infectious causes and non-infectious causes. And the non-infectious fever can generally be excluded by good history taking and good clinical examination to determine the any signs or any features pointing out to non-infectious causes. But if you have a patient with temperature between 102 to 105, it is generally considered infectious. If you have temperature more than 106 degree, it is considered as non-infectious causes of fever. So when you approach non-infectious causes of fever, it can be divided into fever with shock and fever without shock. So the causes of non-infectious fever with shock would be thyrotoxicosis or thyroid storm, or hemolysis, hemolytic anemia, or adrenal insufficiency. I think these are some of the conditions where fever can be present with hypotension. And non-infectious causes of fever without shock, I think drugs are one of the common culprit, or transfusion reactions, acalculous cholecystitis, pancreatitis, or venous thromboembolism. So these are some of the causes where non-infectious causes of fever can manifest without hypotension. We will just look into each of these individual conditions. So the non-hemolytic transfusion reaction can occur up to 1 to 6 hours after a transfusion has happened. Patients do manifest with fever, chills, and short of breath. So generally, the non-hemolytic transfusion reactions are benign. They do not have any sequelae, but patient may feel little uncomfortable because of the symptoms. So the drug fever poses significant diagnostic challenge in ICU, and this drug fever can manifest several days after the initiation of the drugs, where temperature can manifest with more than 101 degree Fahrenheit, and they do last several days even after cessation of the drugs. I think that is something we all need to keep in back of mind. The drug fever incidence is unknown, and it is a diagnosis of exclusion. So basically, you look at all other causes, and if every other obvious cause is ruled out, you would think of any offending drugs that may be causing the fever. So hypersensitivity reaction to a drug can lead to drug fever, and the drug fever can be due to alteration in the thermoregulatory mechanisms, and some of the drugs that are cited are antihistamines, anti-Parkinson drugs, or phenothiazines. And there are fevers caused due to the local reaction or thrombophlebitis that can occur, and these are typically caused by drugs like amphotericin B, macrolides like erythromycin. Typically clarithromycin is known to have increased risk of this local reaction, even the potassium infusion, sulfonamides, or chemotherapy drugs. And there are drugs which can alter the heat loss. So the atropine causes reduced heat loss, causing fever, or there are drugs like thyroxine which causes increased heat production. So either of these can cause temperature rise. So these are some of the common offenders that are used in ICU which can cause drug fever. So the common offenders in ICU are, I would highlight, is atropine, penicillins, which we use quite commonly, and phenytoin. Little uncommon offenders are azathioprine and even carbapenems like imipenem and vancomycin can lead to febrile response. And some of the rare causes are corticosteroids and macrolides. So for me, any drug that we use in ICU can be a potential cause for drug fever, but these are some of the common ones that you could keep in mind. So what about acalculous cholecystitis? So they present with temperature more than 101 degree Fahrenheit, along with leukocytosis, and they could have abdominal discomfort. And typically the signs include they can have right hypochondriac abdominal tenderness, and mortality in acalculous cholecystitis can range from 30 to 40%. So what about acute pancreatitis? I think they can present with severe abdominal pain where patient would probably lean forward to relieve himself of the pain. And any venous thromboembolism, any blood clots anywhere in the body can lead to febrile response. And venous thromboembolism accounts to 12 to 33% of the causes of non-infectious causes of fever. And pulmonary thromboembolism or mesenteric ischemia are some of the common causes that could be overlooked as causes of non-infectious causes of fever. And adrenal crisis, so adrenal insufficiency can lead to fever as well. So there is reduced cortisol, so which means they can have fever with shock. So the patients typically manifest with confusion, coma, vomiting. So they can have hypoglycemia. They can manifest with fatigue, lethargy, and weakness. So these are some of the non-specific symptoms that you can find. But typically hypoglycemia and hypotension with altered sensorium can be the glaring signs or glaring features of adrenal crisis. So what about thyroid storm? So thyroid storm, generally there is a trigger. So the thyroid storm or thyrotoxicosis causing fever can happen generally after a surgical procedure or infections or a common inciting event, and iodine overload. So if they receive a big iodine load due to any contrast CT, I think that can trigger off the thyroid storm. And how does that manifest? It typically manifests like adrenal insufficiency with confusion, coma, delirium, psychosis, vomiting, and they could have very high temperature, more than 104 degree. And cardiovascular symptoms are quite common. They can have severe tachycardia and they can manifest with heart failure symptoms as well. So what about acute hemolytic transfusion reaction? So this can happen due to ABO incompatibility, and they can present with typically high fever. They can manifest with disseminated intravascular coagulation, hypotension, acute kidney injury, and hemoglobinuria. So these are some of the manifestation of acute hemolytic transfusion reaction. So what is the diagnostic approach to non-infectious causes of fever? So typically for non-infectious causes, I think we should be very systematic in our history taking, in our clinical examination, and investigations guided by good clinical history and good clinical examination. And blood cultures have to be taken in a very systematic or accurate way by cleaning the surface with chlorhexidine or with 70% alcohol plus 1 to 2% tincture iodine. But right now the standard of care is chlorhexidine. After you clean the skin surface, it needs to be dried for 1 to 2 minutes, and that gets grade 1C recommendation. And typically we need to send 2 sets of blood culture. The surface of the blood culture bottle has to be cleaned, and 20 to 30 ml of blood has to be drawn for each culture bottle. And if there is any potential line which may be a source of infection which looks infected, I think that should be removed. That is something which we need to keep in mind. So the management of non-infection, any line anywhere the patient has should be removed. And antibiotics, if you are considering to give empirically pending culture, should be considered only in the presence of shock, neutropenia, or in the presence of any devices like EVD drains in the ventricles or ventricular assist device. Any of these external drains, if they're present, then only I think empiric antibiotics should be considered pending cultures, after which you could consider stopping. Or empiric antibiotics could be considered if fever is very raging, if it's more than 102 degree. So what about the treatment? What is the evidence we have? So the background. So this was a paper which came in by the Korean authors. So association of body temperature and antipyretic treatment and its relation with mortality of critically ill patients. It was a multi-centered prospective observational study. So the background is, if patient has a fever, it is associated with increased mortality. It was a prospective observational study. So the study was done in 25 ICUs where patients were admitted for more than 48 hours. So 4-hourly temperature was checked, and a maximum recording of the temperature was measured and noted down in septic and non-septic patients. So there were 1,425 patients in this study, and the temperature recordings happened 63,441 times. Temperature recordings were made. So if you look at the results, there were 737 patients who were treated with IV paracetamol and other NSAIDs. So that is 51.7% of the patients were treated. So if you compare the mortality between the septic group and the non-septic group, as you see, the septic patients, if they got NSAIDs or paracetamol to curtail the fever or to treat the fever, their odds of mortality was significantly high. It was 2.61, and when they used paracetamol to treat fever, the odds ratio of mortality was 2.05, and that was statistically significant. But if you treated fever in non-septic patients with NSAIDs or paracetamol, the odds of mortality did not go up, and that was not statistically significant. And the maximum temperature recorded in ICU in septic patients was in septic and non-septic was more than 39.5 degrees. Sorry, in septic was more than 39.5, and that was and the odds of mortality was around 8.14. So the risk of dying was very high if the temperature was more than 39.5. So when you look at the 688 patients who did not receive treatment, around 48.3% did not receive treatment irrespective of whether they had fever or not. And you see the mortality, there was no difference between the septic and non-septic group, and the maximum ICU temperature even in that group was more than 39.5. So what basically it tells is, if patient is septic and you give paracetamol or NSAIDs, the risk of mortality goes up, and if temperature is more than 39.5 degree, the odds of dying increases by 8.14, so which is extremely high. So but in non-infectious patients or non-septic patients, even if you give paracetamol or NSAIDs, it did not have any bearing on increasing the mortality. So the conclusions from this study is, patients with fever and who are treated, I think we need to understand they have different biological and clinical implications, and these implications vary in sepsis patients and non-septic patients. So this was another study by the French group, fever control using external cooling in septic shock, randomized control trial. So this was a study done in 200 septic patients where they were randomized into external cooling in 101, and there was no cooling in 99 patients. As you see, the vasopressor need in patients who were externally cooled was significantly less, reduced by 54%, as opposed to patients where there was no cooling done, and that was statistically significant. And the shock reversal happened better in patients where external cooling was done as compared to the group where there was no cooling done, and that was statistically significant. And 14-day mortality also was significantly less in patient group where external cooling was done to reduce the fever, and that was statistically significant. So the conclusions from this study was, fever control with external cooling reduce the vasopressor requirement and reduce the mortality. So basically it says, if someone has a fever, you do external cooling, it had a much favorable benefit. So you could consider external cooling as one of the means to reduce your vasopressor and maybe reduce the mortality. So this was the most recent trial, the HEAT trial, which came by Australasian group in 2015, published in NEJM. So they looked at acetaminophen for fever in critically ill patients with suspected infection. So this study had 698 patients, 355 randomized to IV paracetamol, 354 to placebo. And this paracetamol dosage was 1 gram IV 6th hourly was given until ICU discharge or temperature resolution or antibiotic cessation. And if you see the ICU free days, it was more, where it was more, but it was not statistically significant in the group which got IV paracetamol. And 90-day mortality, there was no difference between IV paracetamol and placebo group. The conclusions from this study was acetaminophen did not have any effect on ICU free days. So in septic patients, you give paracetamol or no paracetamol, it did not have any bearing on the outcome. So the take-home message is that we need to clearly understand what is normal temperature and what is fever. So you call it as fever when temperature is equal to or more than 101 degree Fahrenheit. So the fever in ICUs, there are as many as infectious causes of fever is there, that many non-infectious causes of fever are there. That is something one needs to bear in mind. And if there is non-infectious causes of fever, a good, accurate and crisp history taking is very important, and good clinical examination is needed to identify that there is no potential source and it is non-infectious. And good blood cultures, two sets of blood cultures with 20 to 30 ml of the blood is needed to really rule out any infectious causes of fever. And when you do temperature measurement, we need to understand there is a core temperature measurement and peripheral. The core temperature measurement is with PA catheter, vesical temperature, and rectal temperature. The peripheral temperature measurement is oral, axillary, and tympanic. So, two important things you need to remember while treating fever or non-infectious causes is remove any of the CVC lines that may be there for some time, because that may be the potential source. And the role for antibiotic or empiric antibiotic pending culture is only when there is shock, neutropenia, or when there is external devices that are present like EVD or ventricular assist device. Or you could give empiric when temperature is raging, which means it is above 102 degree. So you could start antibiotic, but then please stop it if the cultures are negative and you know for sure it is non-infectious causes. And treatment, I think we understand from the French study that external cooling has a favorable effect. So you could continue to do cold sponge. The external cooling has had a beneficial effect on reducing the vasopressor need and has a favorable effect on mortality. But the IV paracetamol, I think, as the evidence stands, it had no effect. At least if you watch with the heat trial, you give in septic patients, it did not have any favorable effect. But if you have to subscribe to that Korean study, it showed that giving paracetamol or NSAIDs in patients with sepsis had a detrimental outcome. So I would conclude this talk by saying a fever is an expression of inner rage, and this was a comment or a statement made by Julia Roberts. So I think this is a cartoon which I think which is oh dear, you have fever, I'll make chicken soup. I think there is a chicken outside which says just give him paracetamol. Thank you very much.